They said Earth was 71% water. That used to be a promise, a lifeline. We built cities beside it, prayed to it, waged wars over it. Our oceans weren't just geography, they were blood, flowing, deep, ancient. Every living thing we ever knew either came from the sea, or needed it to keep going. So when they poisoned it, they didn't just kill our world, they tried to kill us. The Itali didn't declare war, no orbital ground bombardments, no demands. Just emissaries with translucent skin and fluid voices, riding starships that shimmered like moonlit lakes. They descended with gifts, desalination engines, microbial scrubbers, cloud condensation stabilizers, technologies we couldn't build even if we tried, technologies we didn't understand till they were already in the water. They said they needed hydrogen, water, liquid life, as they called it, claimed their biology was hydro-dependent, and they couldn't survive without ocean-level salt ratios. At first, it sounded like an exchange, a peaceful trade. Water for wonder. We didn't see the lie until the salt flats started expanding. The machines they built weren't harvesters. They were siphons, massive floating bastions that reached deep into the Mariana, the Atlantic, the Arctic. They weren't taking water, they were changing it. They called it purification, a planetary cleanse, a gift to help us evolve. But our fish started dying, first by the thousands, then by the millions. Whole schools floating belly up in glassy bays. Coral bleached so completely it turned to powder. Microscopic plankton, the very lungs of the ocean, vanished. The water changed it, glowed faintly at night. It smelled sterile, sharp, like antiseptic and ozone. When it rained, it scorched leaves. When it touched skin, it left it numb. By the time the first humans died, oceanic researchers, coastal divers, water treatment engineers, it was already too late. They had called it a gift, but it was a burial. I remember the moment I knew the truth. It was a dive job, standard wreck recovery, off the coast of the Cascades. I was deep inside the skeletal remains of an old cargo freighter when I found it. A cylindrical canister pulsing blue in the cargo hold, labeled in Itali glyphs. The water near it wasn't just cold, it was dead. No fish, no kelp, not even bacterial slime, just silence. Just a wrongness that pressed into your bones. I touched the canister. My gloves began to dissolve. By the time I surfaced, my veins were ice, and my vision swam with static. I barely made it back to land. Fever gripped me for 6 days. Dreams full of drowning stars and whispering water. I should have died. Maybe part of me did. When I came back, the oceans were worse. Whole coastal cities were being evacuated. Not from floods, but from droughts. The Itali water had stopped raining. It clung to itself, repelled Earth's skies. Rivers turned to syrup. Clouds stopped forming. Even snow ceased in the highlands. We weren't just dying. We were being erased. The Itali never said why, never broadcast threats, never responded to protests. They didn't need to. They saw us as pollution, not enemies, not rivals, just noise, carbon, and chaos. Dangerous, primitive animals who had wasted their gift and poisoned the sea long before they arrived, so they decided to clean it, and in doing so, they committed the quietest genocide the stars had ever seen. But not everyone rolled over. I joined the Cascadia wake, the last remnants of coordinated resistance in the Pacific Northwest. Engineers, divers, rogue climatologists, and former special forces. We weren't many. We weren't armed like the Itali, but we had one thing they underestimated: memory. They single quotes depoisoned the oceans, but they drank from them. To their bodies were tied to water, every breath filtered through wet membranes. Every nutrient dissolved into their bloodstreams via direct absorption. And they believed their purification had made it safe. That was their mistake. Cora, our lead biochemist, developed what we later called the shoreburn strain. Not a virus, not a toxin, something older, fused with human mitochondria, marine bacteria, and weaponized resilience. Something not meant to kill outright, just to remind them what they'd tried to erase. We injected it into their own machines. Hijacked a siphon cathedral drifting off the Californian shelf, rewired its output, let the infection spread back into their own hydration supply chain. The water turned on them, not all at once, but enough. First came the whispers, Atali sentinels, collapsing in spasms, water tanks crystallizing from the inside out. Priest scientists screaming as their purification fluids congealed midstream. Then came the drownings. Not ours. Theirs. They tried to evacuate, tried to drain their tanks, but the water clung to them. It wanted to stay. As if Earth had finally rejected their intrusion, had grown a defense in its blood. I remember watching, from the cliffs of Pacifica, as one of their ships cracked in half its inner tanks, erupting in steam. The sea boiled for half a mile. I watched the sky darken with smoke, and for the first time in months, I smiled, because we hadn't just survived, we had struck back. They poisoned Earth's oceans, and then, arrogant and thirsty, they drank from the wrong shore. They say you can't poison the ocean, but they were wrong. Not just the Ateli, not just the alien aristocrats floating in their hydrocathedrals. We were wrong too, thinking the sea was too big, too vast to change. But change it did. The Atali made sure of that. Then we made sure they'd choke on their own purification. We called it shoreburn. But in Atali scripts translated by the few among them who defected, it meant something closer to water inversion. Their priests believed water had memory, that it could be taught, conditioned, rewritten. They thought they could make it forget what it meant to be Earth's sea. They didn't expect it to remember us, and now their cities were crumbling from within. I watched it happen in real time, from a hacked satellite uplink, fed into a makeshift terminal in our underground coast lab. The feed was cracked and pulsing, but it was clear enough. One of the siphon cathedrals, the largest, the one they called Mirth of Tides, was sinking, not collapsing, sinking like the sea wanted it back. Its outer biosynthetic coral-like lattice was buckling inward, warped by pressures. It was never built to resist. Dozens of Atali swam in frenzied patterns around it, their luminous spines flickering blue and red, like fire alarms in the deep. We had no audio feed, but I imagined the panic, the confusion, the rage. They'd spent decades perfecting the cleanse. Dozens of worlds, hundreds of oceans. Never a failure, until Earth, until shoreburn, until us. Transmission loss. The terminal hissed, and the screen died in static. I leaned back in the chair, bones aching from too many hours hunched over relay controls. Cora handed me a thermos of something hot and bitter, steeped from salvaged mint and rain-collected pine needles. Tasted like tar, but it burned going down, in the good way. We got confirmation from Eden's spine, she said. The strain reached their upper filtration tear. I blinked. That's inland. They hydrate their soil networks the same way. Recycled, eternal, closed loop. I let that sit for a moment. The Atali had engineered their own downfall. Their arrogance ran so deep, they'd built their entire ecosystem on fluid memory. Which meant shoreburn wasn't just in the ocean now, it was in them. The resistance was celebrating across all nodes. Coordinated dance bursts in the underground. Domes of South America. A blackout vigil in the Atlantic Arc. A storm signal broadcast on loop from the European ridge. But I didn't celebrate. I remembered what came next. Because no empire ever folds quietly. The Atali didn't fire missiles. They didn't drop kinetic rods. They didn't need to. Instead, they opened the rift. It was a vertical tear in space, stitched with black energy and framed in bone-white tendrils. We didn't know if it was technology or organism. Maybe both. It hovered over the North Pacific for 12 hours silent. menacing, humming with pressure so deep, it rattled the fillings in your teeth. Then it screamed, not out loud, it screamed. Through the ocean. Waves collapsed in on themselves. Currents reversed. Animals, fish, mammals, even birds smashed into coastal walls, like they were being driven by something blind and immense. And then it rained, black, viscous, not water, not even chemical. Atali blood. Their answer to shoreburn was to turn the sea into war. We lost 37 resistance cells in the first 3 days. Any group near the coasts was hit by what we later called the inversion surge. The water stopped. Obeying gravity, it spiraled upward, sideways, imploded lungs before you could inhale. Their siphon tech had been repurposed, weaponized, into biomechanical death blooms. They no longer sought to cleanse us. They meant to drown us in our own home. But here's the thing about Earth. We may be broken, we may be fractured, but we adapt faster than anything they've seen. We'd learned from shoreburn how to code fluids. Now, we learned how to harden them. We developed temp-resistant polymer domes that floated just beneath the surface, invisible to a tally sonar. We learned to mask our metabolic signatures using microbe swarms cultured from our old sewage plants. How poetic is that? We built weapons that sang in water, sound cannons that used Atali song frequencies against their own echolocation, sonic knives that could pierce siphon membranes like butter. Cora even rigged an old whaling vessel with an EMP harp tuned to Atali resonance. It took down 3 harvesters before they realized the music was death. Still, they kept coming, and they learned to dot their warriors, stopped using glassbone rifles. They began to carry reef blades, living weapons that squirmed in their hands and screamed when they cut flesh. They no longer floated above us, untouched. They landed. They built fortress bays in what used to be Tokyo and San Francisco, water-filled spires, shielded from atmosphere, designed to let them march on land for hours at a time. Their armor filtered oxygen through plasma-treated algae. I killed one. I wasn't proud of it. But I was alive. It found us in a subcoastal tunnel, probably traced our saline footprint trail. It was tall, fast, and hungry. Its jaw was lined with bioluminescent teeth, meant for intimidation more than function. We didn't talk. It didn't hesitate. Neither did I. Kora's spear, built from repurposed rebar and coated in mag salt, pierced straight through its chest. It let out a gurgle that felt like regret. I almost pitied it. Almost. We harvested its internal fluid core, and what we found chilled me more than anything the Atali had ever done. Their bodies weren't rejecting shoreburn anymore. They were changing, adapting. Their blood had begun synthesizing counteragent. Primitive, unstable, but growing fast. Cora's hands trembled when she said it. They're mutating, not just reacting. Evolving. We were no longer fighting the Atali who came here. We were fighting what we'd made them become. Part of me feared we'd pushed too far. That shoreburn had done more than punish, that it had transformed. But the rest of most of me tightened my gloves, checked the charge on my sonic rifle, and nodded, because they poisoned Earth's oceans. They killed our whales, our reefs, our children, and we were just getting started. There's a moment when war stops feeling like a cause and starts feeling like gravity. Not an explosion, not a scream, just pressure, heavy, relentless, always pulling you deeper. We were deep, now, not just in the oceans, in blood, in choices that couldn't be undone. After the second rift opened over the South Atlantic, we stopped tracking casualties. The water had gone full inversion, gravitational tides, breaking physics. Wave arcs like spirals, whales beaching themselves in panic on mountain ridges that never touched the coast before. It was like the sea was tearing itself apart, limb by limb. We responded in kind. The Cascadia Wake wasn't a fringe network anymore. It was the backbone. The largest human command structure that still communicated across continents. The old governments were bunkered, scattered, or gone. But we were mobile, coordinated, connected, and we had built something new, the Boar Spear, a vessel, Noah, Leviathan, a submersible aircraft carrier, built from the wrecks of over 30 nations. Its hull was plated with harvested its engines powered by fusion-fed oceanic currents. It didn't float. It pierced water like a blade, silent and vicious. It carried 20 squads, 2 crawler tanks, 6 drone wings, and shoreburn torpedoes. Its mission, strike the Atali home. Node, not, their cities, their seed trench. They hadn't just poisoned Earth, they had rooted into it. A mile-wide rift off the coast of the Indian Ocean, bioengineered and self-growing. That was where they bred their siphons, where they filtered the last layers of their anti-life ocean code, where they pumped shoreburn into their own ranks too. Test counter mutations. They called it Pelagos Prime. We called it the Hellmouth. I was assigned to Delta Spear Team. 5 operatives. 1 mission. Get in, get the sample, get out. Because we weren't just bombing them anymore. We were learning from them, adapting like they did. We weren't just fighting to win, we were evolving to survive. The dive began. At midnight, the ocean above the trench was quiet, not calm, but dead. No currents, no sounds, just weight. As if the water itself was holding its breath as we descended. Lights flickered across our hull, strange bioluminescent spirals, like nervous systems, pulsing in the dark. The Atali had seeded the trench with guard organisms, giant eel-like constructs with mirrored eyes and motion-sensing barbs. But we had mapped their rhythms. We slid past like ghosts, until the bottom. That's when we saw it. Pelagos Prime was alive, not metaphorically. The trench itself pulsed. Its walls heaved and rippled as if it was breathing. At its core, a massive spire, rose-twisting, translucent, glowing from within, like a jellyfish cathedral. The Atali moved around it like worshippers. They didn't swim now, they slithered. Their forms were leaner, sharper, more erratic. They'd changed, and we realized something. They weren't losing. They were becoming something else, something that ocean could no longer reject. We found the entry chamber in the base of the spire, melted through with sonar bombs. Inside, a chamber of stillness. Tanks lined the walls, each one holding a suspended Atali in stasis. Except they weren't whole. They were part human, muscle, hair, fingers. They were trying to splice us, not for peace, for permanence, because we had survived shoreburn and they wanted that code. Cora's voice came through the link. Extract DNA. All of it. We did. I tried not to look at their faces, those hybrids, half-formed, suspended in chemical mercy. But one of them opened its eyes. It smiled, not with teeth, with understanding, as if it knew something we did, as if it pitied us. We rigged the place to burn, charged 5 shoreburn reactors, and primed the fusion overload. As we exfiltrated, the trench began to quake. The spire screamed, not physically, not in sound, but in pressure. The whole sea began to rise. We barely cleared the blast from the surface. It looked like a second sun bloomed beneath the water. The wave that followed hit for continents. But we had done it. Pelagos Prime was gone. The Atali seed was broken. But the war wasn't over. Because now they knew we had crossed the line, and they responded with one of their own. They sent a messenger. Not a drone. Not a soldier. A child. Half Atali, half human. She walked out of the sea, near what used to be Perth, naked, bleeding, crying, and she spoke English. I'm not poison, she said. She was 10. They'd made her not cloned, born, and she carried shoreburn in her blood but stabilized, pure, adapted. She wasn't dying. She was proof that the war was becoming evolution. And now we had a choice. Kill her, or listen. Cora wanted to study her. Some wanted to weaponize her. I sat with her. She told me her name was Lyra, And she asked me a question I still can't forget. Do you want the ocean to remember you as rage or as life? And I didn't know the answer. Not then. But I knew one thing. They poisoned Earth's oceans. We poisoned them back. But maybe if we're not careful, we'll both drown in what we created. She didn't look like a weapon. Lyra sat cross-legged on the rock beside the tide pools, watching bioluminescent barnacles flicker in the moonlight. Her skin shimmered faintly blue in the darkness, not from paint or war markings, but from something inside her. Something old. Something born of 2 oceans, ours and theirs. She was humming, and the sea hummed back. It had been 2 weeks since she walked out of the ocean. 2 weeks since Pelagos Prime went up in light and fire. 2 weeks since the war paused, not ended, not surrendered, just ... paused. Like both sides forgot how to breathe. The Itali hadn't attacked since then, not a single siphon, not a single rift. Nothing but their ships still loomed above the waterline, suspended like judgment. Watching. Waiting. We didn't lower our weapons, but we stopped firing them, because of her. Lyra, half Itali, half human, born of a lab, a trench, and a war. Neither side knew how to win anymore. She bled like us, spoke like us, but when she touched the waves, they shifted, listened, bent. She carried shoreburn in her blood. Not the chaotic lashing version we built to infect. No, hers was refined, evolved. It didn't destroy water, it taught it. The Itali called her the living filter. We called her the girl who might stop the world from drowning, but not everyone agreed. Some saw her as a spy, a Trojan horse, with bright eyes and soft words. The last Itali tricka, final act of infiltration. Others believed she was a miracle, a bridge. I believed she was a child, but I knew what children meant in war, collateral. Or leverage. She stayed with us in a shielded dome just inland from the Pacifica place once used for coral research. Now it was a sanctuary or a prison, depending on who you asked. Cora ran constant tests, biometrics, blood work, neurological scans. Not because she didn't trust Lyra, but because she didn't trust us. Her cells don't mutate under pressure. Cora whispered one night as we reviewed her scans. She's immune to inversion, and if she can stabilize shoreburn in open water, she could rewrite the ocean, fix it, make it something else. I didn't like that answer, because we hadn't fought this long just to change one tyranny for another. I found Lyra alone the next day, sitting beside a dried riverbed where the sea had once kissed the land. She looked up. Are they going to kill me? I froze. No, I said. Too quickly. She smiled, small and sad. You lied well. That's a good thing here, isn't it? I didn't answer. I hear the ocean whisper at night, she said. It's scared, confused, angry, but it doesn't want war anymore. She turned to me. Her eyes shimmered like tidal pools. Do you? I didn't have an answer. Not a real one. Instead, I asked her something no one else had. Why did you come to us? She didn't blink. Because I don't want to belong to just one side. The next day, the Itali sent an emissary, a first-tide priest, towering, masked, armor etched with glyphs that pulsed with current. They didn't speak with mouths. They projected pressure. A voice inside your chest. We seek parley, it said. Not surrender, not peace, parley. They proposed a neutral zone, an oceanic cradle where Lyra would be allowed to seed her filtered strain. Let the ocean choose what to keep, what to cleanse, what to become. We'd monitor. They'd monitor. It sounded like hope, but also like surrender, because the ocean wouldn't be Earth's anymore, or the Itali's. It would be hers, a new thing, a third path. And maybe that terrified us more than war. The wake held a council vote. Cora argued for it. So did half the commanders. The other half wanted to strike again, before the Itali recovered, before they could build another prime, before Lyra could be used. I abstained. That night, I sat beside her again. You know they'll never stop fearing you, I said. I know. Even if you save them. She didn't answer for a long time. Then, I'm not here to save them. I turned, startled. I'm here to save the water, she said. And I finally understood. We weren't the main characters in this story. Not anymore. We were the infection. And maybe, just maybe, she was the cure. She walked into the sea, the next morning. Alone. No armor, no weapons, no soldiers, just bare feet and silence. The ocean didn't rise, didn't rage, it bent, and for the first time since this war began, it sang. It didn't happen all at once. The ocean didn't erupt, didn't turn gold, didn't swallow cities in some final surge of fury. No trumpets, no glory, just change, small, relentless. It started the day Lyra walked into the sea. She disappeared beneath the surface like a whisper, leaving no ripples behind, no screams, no farewell. The water shimmered for a moment, then stilled, and then, quietly, the sea began to breathe. The first signs were microscopic. Plankton strains we hadn't seen in years bloomed again, flourishing in deep trenches where nothing had pulsed in decades. Salt ratios began to fluctuate, not rise, not flat, adjusting themselves, not to climate or pollution, but to balance. Kelp forests blackened by a tale filtration began to unfurl again, inch by inch, green, tendrils clawing their way out of chemical ruin. Crabs returned to estuaries. Salmon to rivers. Whales stopped singing in panic. They sang something else. The Atali watched from the rift lines, silent. They didn't send soldiers, didn't send machines. Their warships hung like shadows in the deep, their lights dimmed, their sonar muted, waiting, listening, because, whatever Lyra had become, it was bigger than both of us now. She had entered the ocean, a hybrid. She became its voice, and the ocean began to speak back. We monitored the shift from the boar spear, now converted into a floating sanctuary ship. No weapons, just scanners, labs, observation rooms, and ironically gardens, real soil, real vines, grown under artificial sun. Life returned, not in thunder, but in whispers. But with those whispers came something else, something new. Shoreburn, as weed, made it was gone. Its chaotic strands dissolved, consumed, replaced by a fluid intelligence, part pathogen, part symbiote, a network. Lyra wasn't just its source. She was it. Her consciousness pulsed through water, like thought through blood. The ocean had memory, and she had become its mind. We started calling her the current. And then, on the 39th day, she returned. Not as a girl, not quite. She rose from the sea in a tower of light and pressure, walking across the surface as if it was solid. Her body no longer shimmered blue. It shimmered everything, like a coral reef glimpsed through a tear in the sky. She didn't speak, but we heard her inside. The ocean has chosen. And then she gave us our choice. Not a threat, not a plea, just truth. We could stay, remain part of this new ecology, evolve with it, learn, breathe it, not just survive, but belong, or we could leave. Not the planet, the water, abandon the coasts, live inland, never touch the sea again, never take, never burn, never mine, be strangers in the world. We once ruled. It wasn't an ultimatum, it was a test to see if we deserved to remember what Earth was. The wake split. Some accepted the gift, the adaptation, let the ocean enter their lungs, their cells. They changed, slowly, painfully. But they lived, not human anymore, not a tally, something else. Others fled, built walls, dams, skyports, tried to hold back the tide. It didn't fight them, it just waited. Eventually, they stopped reporting. I stayed, not because I wanted to change, not because I wanted to worship, because I needed to know. what came next. Years passed. We no longer measured days by calendars, but by tides. The ocean swelled and shrank with rhythms not tied to the moon anymore, but to her will. To Lyra, the emissaries came again, not to threaten, to learn. They knelt in shallow water, heads bowed. They asked not for conquest, but forgiveness. Some say they returned to their stars afterward. Some say they dissolved into the waves. I watched them go, and I wept, because in all the years of war, I had never imagined an end like this. Not peace, not victory, but harmony. A fragile, alien kind. Earth is not what it was. The oceans are alive in a way they've never been before, and so are we, those of us who stayed, who listened. We don't build cities anymore. We grow reefs. We don't burn fuel. We sing to the tides. We don't rule the planet. We serve it. And some nights, if the wind is still and the waves are soft, I can hear her voice ripple through the shore. They poisoned Earth's oceans and drank from the wrong shore. But the sea remembers, and now it forgives. Not because it must, but because it can, and that is humanity's true victory.